Help me out here a little bit. What do you want to do tonight?
Well, basically what we have is, so we have this grant. We are encouraging farmers to try, sorry, I'm also like trying to get this live stream to work.
Help me out here a little bit. What do you want to do tonight?
Hold
I
on.
hear myself echoing back here.
Yes, let me, I promised everyone I would live stream this, so let me fix that, and I think I did. So now you shouldn't hear an echo, is that right?
I'm talking now, so no.
All right.
Good.
Yeah, so basically what this is we got about 25 farmers in this program. We are, farmers come at all different levels. Some of them have a lot of experience planting green. Some of them are and there's other people that are, you know, kind of your standard cover crop user. They use it a couple times on half or some of their fields. We are encouraging them all to try either roller crimping,
right,
or planting green or grazing cover crop. And they're all going to do one of the three.
Okay.
We're giving them a lot of equipment. We basically give them a pretty generous equipment budget, you know, anywhere between $10,000 and $15,000 to buy anything they need.
Wow.
And then we're also paying them per acre. So they're doing anywhere between small farms are doing 1 acre, big farms are doing 100 acres.
Right.
It's a 2-year study. And there's a lot of money in the grant basically to educate them so that they can be the most successful. And so I'm hoping they come here with questions that you can kind of answer, and it'll be very conversational. But you never know with these things.
Yeah. Did you want me to have PowerPoint slides?
Nah.
Good.
I just want it to be conversational, I think. I think PowerPoint. I have to figure out this stupid live stream though. Because like, you know, half these farmers, they've never used Zoom. Hey, John, how are you?
It's like John needs to unmute himself.
Yeah, it might be connecting.
Hey, I'll be back soon, Bridget.
All right, sounds good.
I got to get some beverages here.
Good.
Hey, Bridget.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for joining.
I have no idea what I'm doing. I can't believe I'm actually seeing your pretty face.
Oh, you're too generous. I am like trying to, I've never done this whole live streaming thing, and it didn't go quite as well as I would have liked.
Was that Steve Groff on the phone on the line?
That was Steve Groff. Yeah, he'll be back.
I thought that was him.
Have you met him before?
Yeah, I've been to a couple of his talks.
Oh, good. Yeah, he's a great speaker. I can't.
Yes,
I'm gonna have to share a new link.
I can go in the other room now. I just, you know.
How's everything on your farm?
We're doing good. Cover
Great.
crops are all up. They're all growing real well.
That's great.
Not ready for you.
Yeah. So just do what you got to do. I just got on early because I had no idea what I was doing.
No, yeah, it's good to experiment when you got new software. All right, let me, I guess I'm gonna send out a new link.
I'm going to go in the other room and get the charger.
What you're charging?
Yeah, I need the charger.
Let's see.
Hey, hon. Kat. Yeah. Could you bring my phone in?
I bet I should start.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good.
All right.
I've seen you a few times with the King's Agri-Seed when you've talked with them.
Oh, okay. Are you a dealer with them or you work with them a lot?
I'm a dealer.
Oh, good. Yeah, they're a good company. They know about as much as anybody with cover crops and soil health and so forth.
Oh, yeah. I've gone through quite a bit of classes with them, so I know a
Yeah.
little bit.
Where do you live?
I'm in Hillsborough, New Jersey.
Help me out a little bit. North, south, central, or where?
Close to Princeton.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know where that's at.
Yeah.
I've actually been to Princeton once.
Yeah. So we got our cover crops in already. We're part of the grazing part
Okay.
of research. We raise all our own beef cows.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah. So what I did was because we're, pretty much try to follow as many organic principles as we can.
Mhm.
We're not organic, but we try to
Right.
follow that.
Right?
I was going to use Ray's Crazy Mix,
Oh, yeah.
but I was afraid to use it because of the, when you plant annual rye on our farm, it really grows super well. And
Okay.
it's kind of hard to terminate
Yes.
when you want to get we're going to plant like a sorghum in the spring for our cash crop.
Okay.
So what we did was we took the rye out and we put wheat. I think we took the rye and the and the vetch out, and we
Okay.
put the wheat in its place.
I see.
So everything else we put in there because I think I can more easily terminate the others and get
Right.
the without having a major problem.
Right.
I'm trying not to do major tillage is what I'm trying
Gotcha.
to,
Yep.
so.
Now every farmer has to kind of come up with their own recipe.
Yeah.
And I tell
So-
people, they ask me, everybody wants a recipe. I'm like, well, I'll give you a starter, but you have to take it from there.
Yeah, well, we never did this before with the brassicas and the turnips. So we tried a bushel, or not bushel, a bag per acre,
Hmm.
and we did some fields with 2 bags per acre. So the 2 bags per acre, it looks like a field of brassicas,
Oh,
but the other one, it's not as dense.
Yep.
So I got to see when it comes time to graze them in November, what we
yeah.
actually.
There's one thing I've learned is, you observe the growth of cover crops and everything, and it's no different than cash crops. It's not till they're done accomplishing what you want them to do that you really make judgments on them, because
Yeah.
sometimes it surprise you either way.
Yeah, well, the other thing, I have a Salford vertical tillage machine.
Yep.
So in some of the fields, we just ran that through them, and where we did that, we got great results.
Okay.
So we had a couple fields that had heavy Kentucky 31
Yep.
fest in them, and we couldn't get rid of that. So that we burnt those fields down. And
Yeah.
when we burned them down, we tried to no-till in them, and they came up nice, but not as nice as
Oh,
where we did we ran that tillage machine through just one
Well,
time.
what do you think the difference was? You think it was a planter issue, or what would you?
I think what I think it was is that we have a hay buster drill,
Yes.
and I think that to get through the grasses, I had to put more down pressure
Yes.
to cut. And when I did that, then when you would break through, in some locations, the drill would go a little bit deeper
I see.
than I wanted it to go,
Right.
where I didn't have that issue. Where I ran the tillage machine through, I
Mhm.
didn't have that much of a problem getting through the grasses because I had kind of beat them up a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because the thing I noticed the most was I don't have as much crimson clover in those fields,
Okay.
not as much. So, I mean, they're all covering. I mean, I think I'll be fine, but it just, I could see the difference,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, every year, every time's a learning experience.
I know. Well, my good customers know that, and the ones that don't know, it's frustrating. It's frustrating.
Yes, I hear you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So we've been fortunate. I know I was talking to David Hunsberger, and
Yep.
he had a really tough year this year. They had no rain at all out there.
I know they were really dry up there. And it's interesting. They started getting some rains, but I just had a fellow from Massachusetts visit me, and he said it's one of the driest they've ever had. Where
Yeah.
Massachusetts somewhere, I'm not sure where, but very dry up there.
Yeah. So if nobody's coming on, I would tell you, I just got an email telling me to go to a different address.
You know what? That was my fault. So
Oh, yeah.
well, I've never live stream a YouTube event. So I realized that Zoom may not be the easiest for everyone. And so I thought I'd offer this live streaming YouTube. I thought I could schedule the live stream, but I did, but then I couldn't figure out how to link it. So basically that's just the other YouTube. That's where it's all being streamed onto YouTube for people that don't have Zoom. And that's working fine. I can tell how many people are watching. But yeah, I mean, you never know when we're trying to get farmers to a webinar. It's not the easiest task in the world, is it? Especially right in the beginning of harvest season.
Yeah.
First time I've done Zoom.
Oh.
Yeah, really
We-
fun. How was it setting it all up? Not too bad.
It was okay. We got through it.
All right.
That's what you have a wife for.
Yeah.
Poor kids.
Well, if we don't get that many people coming on, I promise I'm recording it right now. And so a couple people said they didn't know if they could make it, based on how late they'd be harvesting. So I'll record it and send it out, and we'll have other people watch it. And we'll still pick your brain, Steve.
Oh yeah. Hey, no problem.
But yeah, maybe we'll just give people another couple of minutes to hopefully figure out Zoom.
Yeah.
I tried to send out an excessive amount of reminders, but you never know.
Yeah.
Raj, how's your farm doing?
Good. We just closed up the sunflowers this weekend, so
Great.
it was busy. We had more crowds than we expected with the COVID pandemic. So
You had some great weather. I mean, that was,
yeah, people are just looking for something to do, and they just kept coming.
What do you do, Raj, with the sunflowers?
We have I started a sunflower maze 10 years ago.
Sunflower maze.
Yeah, so
I
now
see.
a lot of them, but people come from all over the country.
Wow, isn't that something? That's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, that's great. I love to hear innovative things like that.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's good. A lot of dealing with people this year, so
Strange year
now
to
it's
do
time
it,
to
too.
get back to farming.
I hear you.
like, yeah, maybe we'll just wait until 7:05. People can continue just to chat. For those of you that are here, we're just going to give everyone a couple more minutes to log in, since Zoom is probably new to a lot of you. And just so you hear, if this is your first time on Zoom, you can click at the below. There should be the word chat and a little picture of like a little dialogue icon. If you click on that, you'll see that a bar will show up on the right. It's like a chat area where people can post comments. So if you have a question, anything you want to ask, you can feel free to jump in at any point, but you can also just type it into the chat and I'll be sure to present it to our speaker. All right. Well, I don't want to keep you guys waiting. Maybe we'll start out with our executive director, Laura Tesseri is here today. She's going to give a little introduction about the program, where it's at right now, and just introduce herself. Laura, do you want to get started?
Yeah, hi. Good evening, everybody. I'm Laura Tesseri, Executive Director of North Jersey RC&D, and we are basically a nonprofit that exists to assist landowners in employing good practices on their land. So often these practices have multiple benefits and are good for both the farmer and the community. And we see this often in practices that work towards soil health. So like we know, if you reduce nutrient loss to waterways, increase drought resilience, increase yield stability, and look to increase biodiversity. North Jersey RC&D looks to further a lot of our work. We're small. We look to further a lot of our work through partnerships. We're a close partner with the Natural Resource Conservation Service. In fact, many of you—
One who made that big of a mud puddle.
No, that was my sister.
No, it was actually—
Many of you might know our aerial seeding program, which is a great example of a partnership with North Jersey RC&D and NRCS. But I just want to make everybody aware, we are a separate organization from NRCS. We're a nonprofit, and that allows us to seek grants and receive grants. That allows for then the on-the-ground programs and implementation, such as the project like the one we're doing right now, working with all of you. So this on-farm trial is supported by the Conservation Innovation Grants. It's a program at USDA, NRCS. And this project was nationally selected and funded through a new component of the 2018 Farm Bill. So it's the on-farm trial soil health demonstration. So I hope you guys are all proud to be a part of it. And we're pretty proud that we're able to work with such a wide diversity of farms, from small vegetable operations to large grain operations, to people who graze both under organic and conventional management. So you've all chosen like a wide range of implementation, from whether it be planting green to roller crimping to grazing of cover crop. And I just wanted to speak briefly on time frame, because I know we're all interested in getting time frame going and getting this project underway. So to date, Bridget or Christian have traveled out to your farms, and you've looked to select fields, right, for the trials. And now going forward, I know that many of you are interested in those equipment budgets. So as an organization, RC&D, we're currently working on the paperwork end. So we're doing the paperwork and the mapping that's necessary by our granting agency, by NRCS. And so these equipment budgets, thank you for your patience as we have been finalizing them, but we will be sending you, for planning purposes, those budgets next week. So you can use that number then to submit any equipment request back to Bridget, but purchasing itself will need to wait until that paperwork and the mapping is all given the green light by NRCS. So we pledge to be in touch and be as transparent as we can regarding the purchasing timeframe, but we anticipate it being within December, January timeframe. But in the meantime, Bridget has done a lot of work and has planned for these interactions like this, where we could have information given on cover crop selection and planting rates, and then next Thursday will be nutrient management and pest management. So I just want to personally thank you all for joining tonight, and I'll turn this over to Bridget to introduce our speaker.
Great, thanks so much, Laura. And for those of you that haven't used this software before, I just want to point out two things. In the bottom left-hand corner, there's a little button that says mute with a microphone. Most of you are muted right now. If you need to talk, just unmute yourself. You can also look to post comments in the chat. So if you click chat at the very bottom, there a little box will show up where you can chat. Anything you write there, I'll be sure to bring to Steve's attention. And so without further ado, I want to introduce our speaker, Steve Groff. Steve Groff is kind of a world-renowned leader in the field of cover crop and kind of innovative cover crop management. He's got a wealth of knowledge, and he will kind of share with you everything that he's learned over his many, many years of doing this. And again, we don't have a formal presentation scheduled. We wanted this to be informal. We wanted you guys to have a chance to ask questions, get answers. So feel free to jump in anytime you have thoughts. So Steve, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure.
Oh,
Go ahead.
one more thing I want to sorry. I just also want to point out that Eric Rosenbaum is here too. Eric, you probably heard, is the crop consultant that's on board with this study. Eric, can you just say hi real quick so everyone?
Sure. I'm Eric. I'll be talking next week. Tonight, I'm here to listen to Steve and learn just like the rest of you.
Great. Thanks. All right, Steve. Sorry about that. Without further ado, Steve.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, as Bridget said, we want this to be more of a, you ask your questions here. I don't presume to know everything or share about, what you're interested in or not, what your questions are, what your challenges are, or your successes. I'd love to hear successes as well. We were talking a little bit earlier here with John, how he doesn't like annual ryegrass in his farm. And I get that. There's some people that's their favorite cover crop, and some people that's the favorite cover crop to cuss at. So what's good for some people is not good for others. And I think that's important when we talk about anything we're talking about in soil health is, we talk about principles of soil health, keeping the ground covered, living roots, and less soil disturbance, using animals. But more and more I start to see these principles they add another one. Sometimes there's the fifth or sixth one. And that is, it's all about the context. And the context sometimes is your geography, where you live, what your weather is, what your rainfall is, what your soil types are, and your experience. I mean, let's face it. I've been really into this for 25 years, 30 years or more, and I still am learning. I'm still trying to figure some things out. And sometimes nature throws a curveball, and you have to evaluate that in the context of what and everything. So I think it's important to understand that. I know that one of the topics here we wanted to cover a little bit this evening was planting green, planting into green cover crop with your cash crop, typically corn or soybeans. I guess I'm just wondering, I know we don't have a big audience here tonight, but anybody want to share about their experience planting green or their perspective of it? Anybody? So, John, are you thinking of saying something? I see the wheels are spinning there.
Well, for me, our plan was to plant the cover crop, graze it this fall,
Okay.
so we could try to get grazing all the way through till the end of December.
Yep.
Then the plan was to go in the beginning of the year, maybe mid-April, late April, and then start grazing again with the idea of taking the crop out by the end of May. Our plan was to do a sorghum and be able to take that off for silage around the middle of August.
Okay.
So we could get back in again with a cover crop. Because with us, it's all about getting the cover crop up and well established so we could utilize that for grazing in the fall, which gives us a real good double cropping.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so the question we're struggling with is, do we take the sorghum and plant it at 30-inch spacing and then try and put something in between it?
Hmm.
Or because it's sorghum and not corn, are we better off just doing like a 7.5-inch spacing and not need any other crop growing in there?
Mhm.
That's kind of what we're trying to not struggle with, but trying
Yeah.
to figure out what's the best way to do it. And that's why I'm all ears for you or anybody else to
Oh.
give thoughts to it.
I appreciate what everything you're saying is very good fundamental principles. What I want to expound on maybe a little bit is the wonderful thing about the summer planting window. We'll call it a cover crop or a forage. In your case, it's really a forage. Is that we have like dozens of options of species to use. You mentioned sorghum. I'm assuming you said you'd plant it, you'd harvest it in August, meaning you're harvesting as a forage, right? Not the seeds, correct?
Oh, yeah, no, this is going to be made into silage for the
Correct.
cow feed for the winter time.
So Mike, well, when you say silage, do you wrap it or you put it actually in a silo or bunker or something?
Well, I normally make baleage
Right,
with all
right.
the crops. We were going to possibly try with the sorghum to have somebody come in, cut it, and do ag bags.
Oh, okay.
That's an option that we're
Sure.
kicking.
So, one of the questions I'm kind of asking here is, how do you get your nitrogen to grow these forages here? Do you have legumes that we can talk about that, or do you have manure that you put on, or is your grazing system, you're grazing it a couple times a year the way it sounds?
I pretty much use chicken manure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I get chicken manure, and basically anything that I cut to take off for baleage, I go back with a ton of chicken manure. So if I'm making baleage in some of my fields,
Mhm.
if I do 3 cuttings a year, I put 3 tons of chicken manure, 1
Gotcha.
ton by the time I'm done.
Okay. So, one of the things that I would suggest you might look into to try to maximize your biomass, your forage over the summer, is maybe you said sorghum, but what about sorghum Sudan grass?
Well, that's what I normally use.
Okay.
I've never done sorghum before.
Hmm.
With this project, we're kicking around whether
Yeah.
we go. We're very adept at sorghum Sudan grass. That's
Gotcha.
what we're used to doing. So we're trying to research right now whether a sorghum product would be better than
Yeah.
our sorghum Sudan. And
Right.
I have been told that on some certain sorghum Sudans, you can cut it and then windrow it and still make silage out of it.
Mhm.
So, but in any event, we do baleage. That's what we do here. We've done that all the
Yeah.
time
And
through the last couple of years.
I've done that myself and have done that on occasion. I wonder now you have chicken manure and apparently it sounds like it's very much available to you, because I was going to ask, why wouldn't you put some legumes with that sorghum Sudan, like cowpeas would be a good one, maybe sun hemp, but cowpeas is kind of the best one to match up with sorghum Sudan. And I know that there's a lot of good sorghums out there now, and again, it does depend what your end goal is for that feed. You want more of more of a corn silage ration, or do you want more of a hay ration? Because you can mix your cover crop species to kind of make, blend that a little bit. Depends how much protein, how much fiber you want to get. And I know early on, and I don't want to promote any particular company, but I know you work with King's Agri-Seeds, and they're really have a lot of experience of doing this kind of thing, what you're saying.
Well, I'm all for using less chicken manure because it costs me less money.
Okay.
So are you saying that you literally would, when you plant your sorghum Sudan, at the same time you would try and go in and put the cowpeas right in at the same time?
Oh yeah. So if chicken manure is something that costs you, and I got to ask you this, at some point you're going to get high in phosphorus.
That's a concern. That's
right.
a concern.
Right. So why don't you try getting some cowpeas? I'm going to say sun hemp, but sun hemp, you do want to make sure you cut it probably within 6 weeks or so. I forget what the timing is on that. I used to know because it can get fibrous fairly quickly Cowpeas, not as much, but both sun hemp and cowpeas do add nitrogen. They're the best summer cover crops to companion with your sorghum sudan. So there's an opportunity that you could maybe skip an application or two, or an application of your chicken manure to grow the legume with it, and you'll increase your protein a little bit in that, if that's helpful to you. But more so, that legume will help your sorghum sudan grow.
How do you, Steve, how do you plant that? Do you plant that in the same, like you put that in one box and the sorghum?
Yeah, you
box?
could. I mean, Kings, I know, mix it up, and they might want to put some millet and some sorghum sudan and some sorghum. Depends how creative, you can get into that. You can quickly
No.
go to 6 to 8, 10, 12 mixed species in the summer because there's so much available.
Okay, but you put them in the same row. You're planting them in the same row.
Yes, and with the drill. Yeah.
Okay, okay,
Yep.
all right.
Yeah, with cowpeas and sorghum sudan, their cowpeas aren't really that roundish. They would probably would not separate. Once it's blended and mixed, it probably would be fine. I don't think that's going to be an issue for you. And as soon as you start getting 3, 4, 5, 6 species, the separation or whatever, the tricky part is trying to figure out how to set the drill. Now you can kind of do the math pretty quick. If you just think it through, probably sorghum sudan is listed, or sorghum is listed in your drill in the index thingy there. And you can use that. Cowpeas, what I always do is think about what is the pounds per bushel. So, barley is around 48, oats is around 32, wheat and soybeans is around 60. So cowpeas are heavy. I don't know exactly, but they're probably 56 to 60 pounds. Use a soybean rate for that, or a wheat rate, and that's going to be pretty close. If you can do the math, do the indexing, or you can actually physically calibrate your drill with the mix you have if you want to take time to do that. It's not that hard once you understand how to do it. I wrote a paper up about it, and I published it in the Lancaster Farmer. You can find it there if you Google it. But yeah, that's not that hard to do once you learn how to do it once. But adding the legume there, John, I think would help you out.
Oh, that's a great idea.
You ought to try it.
And that would still make really good baleage then too.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
That would make really good baleage.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. No, thank you. That's a great idea. I work on that with my guy at Kings and see
Yeah.
what kind of put up. Yeah. Thank you. That's a good idea.
Good. Does that gin up any other questions from anybody else that's listening? Any follow-up questions or any similar situation you may be involved in, or anything you might want to add?
Yeah, feel free. Anyone just jump in with questions, and if you don't have them, I'll just pick Steve's brain about general stuff. But
Yeah, Steve, I'll ask a question. So
Sure.
I'm looking to I haven't tried cover crops with my pumpkins.
Yes.
About 20 acres of pumpkins.
Oh.
But with this plan, we're going to do some studies. And what would you suggest I start with as a cover crop for pumpkins?
Well, I commend you for doing with pumpkins, because I would say that would be one of the easier ways to jump into, using cover crops and no-till, than to have cleaner pumpkins. You had said earlier you have a sunflower maze. I'm assuming you probably have U-pick pumpkins too, right?
Yeah, we do a lot of restaurant supply, and sometimes we do U-pick, but I thought if we get a lot of weeds even with chemicals. So if we have the cover crop, I'm hoping to cut the weeds. It's easier for kids to pick.
Yeah. I just was going to reference, if you have a U-pick and you get a decent stand, you'll have a nice field for people to walk out in there. And that's an advantage sometimes once you figure it out. So yeah, typically, I mean, I don't know if you can get your whatever field you might be planning for 2021, now's a perfect time to plant like a hairy vetch, 15 pounds of hairy vetch. And okay, today is September the 17th. I would let me think this through here. 15 pounds of hairy vetch, probably.
wait, just to jump in, because you don't know, Raj is not roller crimping.
Okay.
So would you still do hairy vetch?
Well, is he organic? Are you organic or not, Raj?
No, I'm not organic.
Okay, so you can spray it out.
But do you worry? I've heard horror stories about you don't worry about that and getting tangled up in the row cleaners.
If you have the right row cleaners, oh yeah, they get the wrong row cleaners. You have the original straight tooth spikes. Yeah, that's a horror story. That's a
All right,
horror story right there.
all right, sounds
Yeah.
good.
But if you have
Thanks, Bridget.
the swept back or the shark tooth, I mean,
Mhm.
shark tooth type, and there some of the like Yetter has one. There's most companies now have row cleaners that are, I'll say, cover crop proof.
Mhm.
if you
Okay.
will.
All right.
For the
that's
most
good.
part. I mean, I have the Yetter shark tooth and I don't have a problem.
Oh, okay.
Closing wheels is another area where you might have a problem if you have spoked or spike type closing wheels. That can also be an issue, but
What kind of?
there is something out there
Mhm.
that there is good enough equipment out there now that can be remedied.
What kind of
So-
closing wheels do you feel are best to avoid that kind of wrapping? Do you?
The straight spiked ones, the ones that are straight,
Oh,
the most spiky of the spike ones, if I can say it that way. Some of them are more knobs. Now there's probably 20 different variations now of spiked. So go for the least aggressive one, I would say. There's so many out there, or some that are sort of curved. You can actually buy deflectors to put right in between where they bolt on to the frame of the closing wheel attachment that actually kick it out. That'll keep it from wrapping.
That's neat.
And real recently here, not to confuse anybody, but the newest thing that's coming out, and again, Yetter has this, where they can adjust the pitch of the angle of the wheels, where they can, like if I'm going forward, the pitch changes like this and it just pulls the slot shut. And you don't need as aggressive of spike closing wheels, especially in that thick root thatch that you have to get it shut. That can be an issue. So that's a new technology that's coming out that is really cool. I mean, I have it on my planner. I have seen this all around the world. I've seen it in Europe, Australia, South Africa, and it was like, why don't they have this in the US? Finally, they do.
This is by Yetter, you say. What's it called?
Yetter. Yeah, if you look, they're called angle pitch closing wheels.
All right.
Look it up. I'm sure it's on their website. Angle pitch closing wheels. Yetter. That really solves a lot of closing wheel issues, especially in cover crops, where you have this excuse me, you have this beautiful cover crop with this massive root system, but that's hard to close. Think about planting through your yard or something. It's hard to close the slot because of the sod-like soil texture, which was what we love, but it makes it difficult to close. So that's one, I'll call it fix, that is really going to make a difference. So back to your question here, Raj.
I have one other question on closing wheels. So right now I just have the cast iron closing wheels.
Okay.
So I should probably upgrade to these.
Well, yeah, I mean, cast irons, if they're working for you, I don't know, you heavy clay or sandy soils?
No, it's beautiful sandy soil, no rocks. It's gorgeous soil. So it works pretty well.
I would, okay. I mean, again, how much do you like to tinker? It's just, most of us guys like me, we have piles of junk sitting around our barns, that stuff we tried and didn't work. So, because we can't help ourselves, but that's how we learn, and I'm willing to do that. But if that's not the way you're wired, that's fine. If your cast irons are working and you're getting that seed slot shut, I would say, you're probably, you're doing fine. You're good to go. That being said, if you're having some issues, then maybe you would like to try something else that's out there.
Thank you.
So as far as setting yourself up for no-till cover crops and planting pumpkins, the 15 pounds of hairy vetch and about, I'd say right now, 60 pounds of triticale or cereal rye I prefer triticale because it doesn't grow quite as tall and it doesn't, it's more in sync with the maturity of hairy vetch. It's not quite as early, the triticale is. As the weeks tick by here, you're going to want to increase your triticale a little bit. And, you know, by the time you get into the first week of October, that's about the last week you're going to plant hairy vetch, unless you're the southern part of New Jersey or where, I'm not sure where you're at, Raj, but.
North Jersey, all the way at the
Okay,
top.
so let's just say around October 1st, you get a couple more weeks of hairy vetch. There are some more winter hardy varieties of hairy vetch out there nowadays, which, you know, is something you might want to try. But you're going to have to start increasing your seeding rates of your of whatever you do as the weeks go by. So by the time you hit the middle of October, pretty much relegated to just cereal rye or triticale, and then you're talking 2 bushels, more or less. It does depend on the fertility of your ground a little. My advice to everybody is you got to try something. So 2 bushels is something to try. And if you think it should be more next year, then plant more. You know, it's sometimes field to field, farm to farm, a lot of variability in how these things work out. But
Would you mix the cereal rye and the triticale, or just use one or the other?
there's not a big reason to do that. I don't think, like I said, I favor triticale because it's matched up more, because with pumpkins are later. If you're growing a cover crop / forage, okay, in a different situation, cereal rye is the fastest, grows the quickest. You need early forage, that is cereal rye. And maybe even too for soybeans. If you're planting soybeans in the middle of May, go ahead with cereal rye. But anything that's targeted to be terminated, we'll say the middle of May into June, like pumpkins would be, I prefer triticale. It's a little later maturity, it's a little shorter. I think it stands a little better, you know, for the planting, seeding density, seeding rate and everything. So that's kind of why I favor triticale. And by the way, triticale, every year, there's a percentage or 2 more acres planted of triticale. It's slowly getting more and more popular. And that's literally around the nation. So. Does that help you there, Raj? I'm not sure
Yes.
if I answered your question.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good. Good.
Anyone else want to jump in with a question? What about, let's talk a little bit about opening, row cleaners. I'm blanking.
Row cleaners.
I know a lot of people, I've heard different strategies. Some people like row cleaners when they're planting green, some people don't. What's your opinion there?
Well, again, there's no single right answer. That's not a black and white question. It does depend. I want to have row cleaners on my planter. It's kind of like a 4-wheel drive on a pickup truck. You know, 30 years ago, that was a special thing to have a 4-wheel drive pickup. I mean, you had a real pickup when you got 4-wheel drive. Okay, now it's pretty much standard. And what percentage of the time do you use a 4-wheel drive? 1%?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but that 1% is pretty dramatic when you need it. Same with row cleaners. I wouldn't buy a planter without row cleaners, but there are times where they're completely lifted up. There's no need for them, and that's, for my case, usually later on in the season. The soil's warm enough. I don't need to clear it off. I, want to leave things as intact as possible. And then there's other times where it's cool. It's maybe on the wetter side or whatever, and you would like to clean them off. Or if you have a rough field, I mean, I've rented fields from neighbors, and it's a little rougher than I usually keep them. So, and contrary to Raj, I have stones. So sometimes, I don't see my stones as much as I used to, but I still have a stone here and there. And just to have that row cleaner right there, nicking the ground, just to move a stone out of the way is certainly a beneficial use of a row cleaner. And the other thing in heavy covers, depending on how your planter is situated with coulters or not, you want to be a little more aggressive on that, especially if your cover crop is lodged. if it's blown down and it's the other opposite way of the way you're planting. So I typically do not run coulters. And I will say that that is the standard, that is the trend, I mean, for veteran no-tillers. If you would take a survey of farmers who have no-tilled, I'm gonna say more than 7 or 10 years, those guys are taking their no-till coulters off because their soil is getting more mellow. And it's just, again, I would have to say with the evolution of better planters now, especially the ones that are air or hydraulic pressure, a spring type planter, I wouldn't recommend eliminating the coulter as much because we can use more down pressure on that row unit to get those double discs to get in the ground. Now, having said that, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I don't know how much it applies to all of you, but you want to use at least 3.5 millimeter blades, the thickness of your disc blades. That is now becoming the standard on newer planters, but it used to be 3 millimeter. Make sure you're 3.5, and there's even some 4 millimeter now planters that have they're heavier duty, and they're designed for no-till. And you know, they won't flex as much, and you got to be really careful because too light of a double disc opener will get more wear on your seed tube protector, and it'll also wear out your seed tube potentially quicker than you thought. So if you're taking the coulter off, you want to look at your seed tube protectors, which is actually what the function of seed tube protector is probably more to keep the blades from, you know, collapsing under the pressure of, you know, opening up the soil. You want to keep your eye on them. If you plant a lot of acres every year, you better check them when you're 3/4 done. You don't plant a lot of acres, check them at the end of every year. The spring, when you're ready, you know, winter, whenever you're fixing your plant, make sure they're not worn because they will wear out faster if you don't use coulters. So coulters, any kind of a coulter has a wave to it. When you start going over 4 miles an hour, it can start throwing soil a little bit depending on your soil type. And that all then affects how your seeds are placed, the consistency of your seeds. I've seen, you know, chunks of soil blown out, you know, they're 1 inch long, 1.5 inches wide or whatever. And, you know, it can create some uneven emergence. I'll just tell you, when you have a nice setup without a coulter and your planter's dialed in and you can hardly see that the field was planted, that's ideal. But going back to using row cleaners, if I had the choice between a row cleaner and a coulter, I would always take the row cleaner. Now I've had a planter since 2013. Last planter I bought was in 2013. I bought coulters with it, and actually I told the guy when I bought it, I don't want them on, don't put them on, but I want them. So I got the coulters in a separate pile, brand new, and we never used them until 2018. For 5 years they were sitting there, never used. 2018 was a wet spring. I had a friend of my neighbor who had some wet fields, and it was the middle of June till he got to plant those fields, and he had triticale in there that was literally, I think some of the seed might have been viable. It was that old. So it was tough stuff. And his planter could not cut it. But with my planter, we put those, again, it was really nice. They were brand new, so they were sharp. We put those coulters on there, and I actually put 40 pounds of down pressure on my row cleaners. We talked about row cleaners. I actually have the ones I can raise and lower from the tractor. Precision Planting has them. I'm going to tell you, if you have a little extra money, you'll never deal without them, because if you're really serious about fine tuning the planter, there's nothing better than you can do it from the tractor. We literally were putting 40 pounds of down pressure down, and then having that coulter, it's wraparound row cleaners, what I have, and the coulter's right there in the middle. So that row cleaner was actually gripping the very mature strawy type cover crop, and that helped the coulter cut it cleaner. And the row was not cleaned off barely at all because it was so thick. This stuff was down and blown every which way. It was the toughest thing we've ever planted. But you know, we put them coulters on this year. only because I was trying to direct seed some hemp, and I won't get into all that. But those coulters really were only used on 50 acres. I don't know how many thousands of acres I planted with that planter, but I'm just trying to give you a little bit of a context, and it's my context, maybe not yours, but my context. I don't use coulters, but I use row cleaners. They're on there. The purpose of row cleaners is to be used when I need them, and that's it. If I don't need them, we don't use them. So
That's great.
yeah.
All right, so next question for you. About half the people in this group are going to be trying roller crimping for the very first time. So do you want to kind of go through how you prepare for that, what kind of seeding rates you would typically look to do, and when to roller crimp? And then next week, I think just Eric will focus a little bit more on the nutrient management side of things. So you
Okay.
don't have to delve into that as much.
Well, welcome to the Roller Crimping Club. I first started this in 1995. I heard about it from Brazil. Built my, I think it was the first cover crop roller in the United States back then, and but still use it today. So mine's off a Buffalo rolling stalk chopper, highly modified, by the way. One thing I'll tell you right up front is majority of the literature, the stories, the articles about roller crimping and organic are, I think, a little too positive because farmers typically don't want to wait until that cover crop is fully, well, I should say, mature enough for the roller crimper to kill or terminate the cover crop without herbicides. In the case of grains like cereal rye, it has to be past the pollination stage. I used to say pollination stage, but I'm not sure if that's maybe a little soon. The milky dough stage is probably, when that roller crimper will terminate. A hairy vetch needs to be at least mid-bloom. In other words, the field has to look purple from the flowers. You can't see one flower and then say, well, I'm going to roll my cover crop and you expect it to be 100% dead. It ain't going to happen. Just telling you. But there's some techniques around this. If you want to push it a little bit, you want to push the timing here, you can roll it twice or 3 times. There's people do that. There's people will roll, then they'll plant, then they'll roll again before the crop comes up. So rolling pretty quick to do and pretty fast. So that's just a little bit on the outset. If you're using a roller crimper instead of herbicides, or you're using your cover crop / roller crimper instead of herbicides.
And just to give you a little bit of background on the participants, we have 2 people that are doing organic roller crimping, but I think about 10 or 15 that are just doing it with additional herbicide.
Yeah. So then I say that a little bit of herbicide goes a long way with roller crimping. You can cut back. And actually, you know what's ironic? What motivated me what interested me with the roller crimper was in 1995, the price of Roundup was about $45 a gallon. And my impetus was, hey, I can cut my Roundup rates back. And I was using just like a half a pint or a pint the most. And it worked great with that. So
18 Farm Bill to get a machine called a roller.
So anyway, that's why I got started. That's really what I got into. Of course, I had you have to lay the crop down, but since you're going to have access to roller crimpers and so forth, you might have to question, well, do I spray herbicide before I roll crimp, or do I do it afterwards? And I'm telling you that you can do both. There's not a correct answer. What I will say is monitor the moisture that's in your soil is one dynamic you want to stay in touch with. If it's getting dry and there's no rain in sight and it looks like we're having a dry spring or whatever, you want to terminate it sooner. That's just management. If it's wet, on the other hand, it may be time to roll and you're not quite ready to plant, or there could be some threat of showers. Don't spray that until you have it, until you're ready to plant. Because if you terminate it and it stays wet and you get, let's just say you have more rain, significant amount of rain, it's gonna be a long time till you get in that field to plant. That's the biggest mistake that people make in the context of rolling. Understanding moisture. in the context of the cover crop. So keep that in mind. I know too that if you have a rental unit or a unit that's, you know, shipped around from farm to farm, it's not always there the day you want it. But you still need to try to manage the best you can. And of course, it depends on your soils. You know, if you have a low-lying wet field, you got to be really, really particular about that. Now, some fields are a lot more forgiving depending on how they, with soil type and all that stuff. So as far as spraying beforehand, some people don't have a sprayer that can go high enough. If you're into something like cereal rye, you don't have to have the boom 18 inches above the tallest head of cereal rye. I mean, I've sprayed cereal rye, you know, a day or two before rolling, where I have a 3-point hitch sprayer on my tractor, and my older sprayer, I could only get it like 4.5 feet high. And I had the heads hitting the boom, but that's okay. There's enough of herbicide gets down through the canopy that it takes it out. No worries. But I will also say this, it's kind of, if you're pushing early a little bit, you can spray after you roll. And most rollers aren't aggressive that it cuts the stems. Actually, you really don't want them to cut the stem. You want it to crimp. That's why we say roll crimping. Because if you cut like a rye stem, if you cut it within 6 or 8 inches of the base, and it's not to the milky dough stage yet in the grain part of it, that can regrow out of there, and then that will have to be sprayed out later. That's going to be a problem. So just some of the little nuances of rolling that you want to be aware of. The question comes to, well, how do I roll my field and then plant later and the headlands and all that? Well, you got to think about that, because you can't plant across the grain. You can't plant across the way the stems are laid. Most planters aren't capable of cutting them cleanly, and you don't want to take that risk. If you have GPS and can lay out your fields, that's easy. You just roll your field like you're going to plant it. And if your planter is not quite the same width as your roller, then you have to kind of adjust accordingly. Or if you have a planter that, especially if you don't have hairy vetch, I'll just say, most planters can plant through 4 to 6 foot tall cover crop. And then you can come in and roll later. That way you have everything planted, and then you can roll it down, and that works. I don't prefer it. I prefer to roll first. I do have GPS, so I can lay the fields out really nice.
What do you think about mounting the roller on the front and then having the planter right behind? Do you like that system?
Well, that's a great option if you have that. I will counter and say, I like to roll when it's time to roll, and I want to plant when it's time to plant.
Interesting.
So there's benefits to that. But for me personally, after 25 years experience, I'm not putting the roller in front of the planter. I mean, I could, and I'm not saying that's wrong, okay? I'm just saying for what I do, because with my pumpkins, I have a lot of pumpkins I plant, like this year, 76 acres of pumpkins and squash. So because I love my hairy vetch will, it gives absolutely no standability on its own. So as it's starting to grow up in the triticale, you have a rain event with some wind. Let's say a cold front comes through the 3rd week of May. And you have this quick gust of wind and rain. That stuff will easily blow down because the hairy vetch just pulls it down. So I'm out there rolling. And I can tell just by looking in the field. I have enough experience. I got to roll that field before this potential rain event. And there's times where I've been, like for instance, one Sunday evening at 11 o'clock, I started rolling because I saw the line of thunderstorms coming through Western Pennsylvania. By 2 a.m. it hit us, and I was so glad I did, because so I worked from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. rolling, and it was just perfect. There's a couple acres I didn't get done because it started raining, and some of that blew down. Made it a little bit more difficult to plant into. So that's some of the stuff you do sometimes. And that's why I like to roll. And that field may not have been planted for 2 weeks. So I have 2 options. I can roll it again in 2 weeks, or I can just spray it out, because what'll happen is the triticale will stay down because the vetch is so entangled around it, it kind of holds it down, but the vetch will grow out I always figure it gives me another 10 or 15, 20 pounds of nitrogen. So that's good. So I typically will roll 1 to 2 weeks ahead of planting. Again, it depends on the field. Pumpkins, this is where I like to start planting pumpkins around June the 1st, end up around June the 20th. But almost everything that is planted June the 20th was rolled way before that. So either roll it twice or just spray it with herbicides and go from there. So are there other specific questions you have on rolling and crimping?
What about what rates do you like to plant?
So
Everything.
the seeding rates, again, it's calendar dependent. As the, we're, okay, if you would have planted back in August, late August or 2 or 3 weeks ago, you really don't need more than 40 pounds of cereal rye and 12, 15 pounds of hairy vetch. But here we are in the middle of September now. You want to start bumping that up, like I suggested earlier, 15 pounds of vetch, 60 pounds, we'll say. Go up to 20 pounds of hairy vetch when you get into the 1st of October, up to 80, 90 pounds or so, 100 pounds of triticale when you hit by the middle of October. So I don't want to confuse people, but the fine line there is if you're using this for your primary weed control, if you're using the cover crop and the crimping method as your primary weed control, you want to have your seeding rates high enough to have enough stems there to actually suppress the weeds and keep them down. The danger though comes if you have it too thick that it blows down and it's difficult to plant into. So there's always a fertility thing here. If you're spreading manure or you have high fertile fields, 2 bushels will look different than 2 bushels on a low fertility field. It just will. So again, you got to start somewhere on your farm. And for some people, there's rates I just suggested are too high and some are too low. But that's a good place to start. See how it works on your fields. That's my best advice on that. I've heard of people going up to 4 bushels already of rye or something, rye or triticale. That seems excessive to me. Maybe there's a reason for it. I don't know. And then I hear people who maybe their primary concern is not weed control so much, and they'll just plant, like the beginning of September, they'll just plant 30 or 40 pounds of cereal rye or something like that. It does tiller out pretty good when you get it planted early. So I know these cover crops, a lot of them are paid for, and so farmers aren't pinching pennies as much as they would be if they'd have to pay for them. But that's a factor too. Sometimes with seeding rates, how much you want to lay out there and invest in this cover crop. But if it is for weed control, and that's going to be your weed control, you want to keep your rates, kind of on the higher side there to be able to aid in that weed suppression just by having a mat of cover crop there to keep the weeds down. And just so you know, I'm just going to tell you, perennial weeds won't be stopped by a cover crop. If you have thistles, those thistles will show up next year. Trust me. Hemp dogweed, all those pesky weeds, they're not going to be stopped by a cover crop. You'll have to deal with them in other ways, and we can talk about that, but that's an issue. But yeah, I mean, I like to say, people say, well, I planted a cover crop and it really didn't suppress the weeds, and well, there might be reasons for that, but herbicides don't work every year either. You have to kind of have that mindset and see what you can do. Obviously, a weedy type field is going to be more challenging. You can't expect just to throw on cover crops and expect miracles all the time. But again, farmers who have been doing this, you start learning and you see what works, and then you go with it.
Would you suggest the first year I use herbicides too with the pumpkins when I go to plant, like a pre-emergent herbicide?
I probably would. You said you had 20 some acres, right?
Yeah.
What herbicides are you using now?
I normally use Strategy. Last year I ended up switching that wasn't available. So I used I forget the two things that make up strategy, but so I had to make it myself.
Is it command and curb it or?
Yeah,
command?
yeah, that's it.
I think. Yeah, I would, you know, what I do is if I have a good field or a good section of a field, I might just turn the sprayer off certain times. But you know, I got 76 acres. It costs a lot of money to hand hoe. Trust me.
Yeah.
Like $1,000 to $2,000 an acre. You know, that's just what it comes to be. And I got to tell you, I don't always have an ideal cover crop. It just stuff happens. So I probably am spraying most of my my pumpkin fields, but I'll stay on the low side sometimes at rates, but every field is treated for its own merit. And we just have, like, we have one field this year. This is, you know, I had pumpkins in that field 3-4 years ago, and it just didn't do very good. And this year it didn't do very good. And I told my son, we just can't plant pumpkins here. This field is not made for pumpkins for whatever reason. And these are just the things you observe as a farmer. And I can't tell you why. It's just not a good pumpkin field. So I guess, you know, there's always limitations to all this stuff that we're trying. But wow, I'll tell you, I wish I could show you some pictures. I have some of my pumpkins fields I planted this year in the middle of June. We didn't touch that field. We never walked the field for weeds. And they're looking pretty good. I didn't have enough help here because of COVID. My H2A workers all didn't come. So I wasn't able to walk my fields like I usually do to clean them up. So I do have some weeds, but it's not very, very few areas are yield limiting weeds. You know what I'm saying?
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any questions they want to jump in with?
What's some of your problems?
I'll ask one more question. I'm gonna try, Bridget and I were talking about trying cover crop with the sunflowers. What would you recommend for that? The cereal rye, or that's what we were leaning toward?
You mean before you plant your sunflower maize?
Yeah.
When do you typically plant your sunflowers for that?
Beginning of June, end of May, beginning of June.
Do you need I mean, I'm just trying to think here. Would you want a legume in there to provide some nitrogen for your sunflower?
I would love that. I would love.
Yep. Well, you have a lot of options. I mean, if you can plant here in the next couple of weeks, hairy vetch, crimson clover are the two most popular ones that'll survive the winter. And I will say that, you know, if you're thinking of doing roller crimping or not, just so you know, glyphosate does not work very well on crimson clover, and it's even worse on hairy vetch. So depending on if you're a vegetable farmer with other stuff, you want to stay away from 2,4-D probably. That early in the year, sometimes it doesn't matter. 2,4-D will easily kill vetch and clover. Or Harmony SG is another one that you can use. It will help kill it. It helps kill broadleaves. You can mix it with a little bit of your glyphosate, like 1/10 of an ounce per acre. Harmony SG, not Harmony Extra that they put on small grains, Harmony SG. I think it's labeled as a burn down. I've been using it for many years now. I really like it because it's only like $3 an acre and it's easy to use and it works. No residual to it. It's the old Pinnacle. If you remember Pinnacle back for soybeans back in the mid-90s, it's just been repurposed now. So, yeah, I mean, hairy vetch and triticale, man, roll that down. Plant your sunflowers in June the 1st. That would be awesome. Do you plant your sunflowers with a drill or 30-inch rows or what?
30-inch rows.
Okay, so then you probably have a good planter that, I mean, you have a no-till planter, or I'm not sure.
Yeah, I have a old John Deere 7000 no-till.
Okay.
Work. Hundreds of acres, works great.
I would suggest you try it. I mean, maybe you don't want to do all your acreage. I know you have a pretty big investment there. If it's a maze, you want the stuff to grow.
Yeah, I was gonna do it on some other fields, not.
I was gonna say you might want to practice in the back 40 somewhere. On that, but no, there's no reason why that wouldn't work. But yeah, get some experience with it. That would be. I know plenty of guys that are no-tilling sunflowers out in the Midwest, upper Midwest, and the Dakotas and so forth. So, and they plant them in the cover crops and so forth. So,
All right, thank you.
yep.
What about people that are planting green for the very first time? What height should they kind of aim for in that cover crop? What
Yeah,
what's a good place to start?
Well, probably it'll work higher than they think. I'll say that. A lot of farmers, first of all, I'll just say that more farmers have took the plunge planting green than I ever would have expected if you would have asked me 5 years ago. This is taken off faster than I would have imagined. And part of that, though, is because we've had about 4 or 5 wet springs in a row, literally across the nation almost. And so they, cover crops have been more popular and they just couldn't plant. And yeah, cover crops will actually grow and get the moisture out of the soil. That's a good thing when it's wet. So that's why I think the increase has been so good, so strong. And the comment I hear, I was scared to death when I did it, but it actually worked pretty good. And that's amazing how many times I've heard that comment. And the key, Bridget, is to, as I alluded to earlier, is to understand moisture. That's, again, I'll just repeat, if it's dry and there's no rain in sight, terminate early. If it's before your planting window, you're going to have to err on that side unless you have irrigation. Most of us don't for cash crops like that. But then if it's 18 inches tall or less, there's no real challenges with the planter. Once you get above 18 inches, 24, 36 inches, then you might start catching some cereal rye. If you have an older planter that has chains on it, chain drives, that's been a problem. It starts wrapping around the chains and the chains will come off. And, depending on your mindset, you're going to cuss the people who told you to do this, or you'll say, I got to roll this cover crop so that doesn't happen. Now, there's a solution to every problem. There was one time when I was planting a couple years ago and I was debating whether to roll it or not. I was getting close, but that had some hairy vetch in it. And if you've ever planted with hairy vetch is very succulent. It'll rip right off and it'll attach to any piece on your planter that is sharp or has a hook to it or anything. Hairy vetch will start catching on that. And there is nothing more frustrating than getting to the end of the field and you have these trails of hairy vetch clumps, on your plant. You have to get off every 2 rounds. Farmers don't like to do that. When it's time to plant, it's go time. No stopping for anything, not even for lunch a lot of times. That being said, I simply took a rope and tied it from the front hitch of my planter to each edge, each side, and that tilted the standing cover crop front, and it solved the problem that I was experiencing in that field. That was a simple fix. Rolling, on the other hand, we talk about some of these challenges here, planting green can eliminate that problem. So understanding how to manage your moisture, never terminate your cover crop if it's on the wet side unless you know that you can get it planted before the next rain. That's a huge thing to understand, that dynamic. The other thing is just having your planter capable of going through heavier residue. And I wouldn't encourage a first timer, unless they know what they're doing and have the right planter, to plant into 6 feet tall cereal rye. Guys have done it successfully, but I wouldn't encourage that unless you have a lifeline, a
Yes.
neighbor, or Bridget. She'll help you, right, Bridget?
Eric.
Eric, there you go. You got some lifelines here. That's just. I would just, again, on that note, I guess maybe I'll say this here while I think of it is, having a mentor, having someone that's doing this kind of stuff. I always recommend that people would get to know someone that is doing what you want to accomplish. If you want to plant green, who in your neighborhood's doing it that's successful? Maybe you don't have anybody in your neighborhood. This is why we go to meetings, and I certainly hope we can start doing meetings again soon, because it's been okay here to have Zoom meetings, everything. But what happens is I can't talk to you in the halls. We can't communicate as much, and I hope we get back to that soon. But all that to say is I'm on 3 or 4 different groups of farmers. One of them is on WhatsApp, Twitter, Facebook, and we talk about this stuff. And one of my mentors is in France, and we have a lot in common. And so, we kind of ask each other questions. Well, how do you deal with this, or what's the latest thing you're finding? So I would encourage each of you, either if you're an influencer to agriculture or if you're actually a farmer, to find a mentor that is doing what you want to accomplish, hopefully in your neighborhood, because then you'll have a lot of similarities to deal with. So yeah, so the context of planting green, if you can talk to someone in the neighborhood, that's ideal. Or go to meetings. I go to the National No-Till Conference most every year. And majority of my time there is talking to other farmers. And attending a few sessions, but talking to other farmers is really where I get the most value out of meetings like that. So I don't know if I covered everything you wanted me there, Bridget, but
No, that was great.
yeah.
I know you guys have questions out there. Don't let me ask them all.
Well, how about if I pick on Eric, because I think I can. Eric, what are you hearing? What are some challenges that you hear from farmers? What's the frustrations that are out there, or successes? But
I think one of the questions, one of the challenges, and also one of the questions that I would want you to expand upon, Steve, is finding higher yielding, shorter season varieties that allow us the flexibility to get a cover crop planted on time, and give us the flexibility to allow that biomass to accumulate before we plant, yet still get the economic returns that we want. And so I guess I would ask you the question, how short a season are you going down in southern Lancaster County?
Yep.
And how many variety trials and tinkering around with just research did you do to arrive at the varieties you're planting here in 2020?
Yeah, that's a great question, Eric. I'm glad you tapped into that, because I think that is one of the easiest ways for farmers to increase effective cover cropping. Most farmers would agree that shorter season genetics are better than they used to be. So we have that. That's more than just theory. Now, from 2011 to 2015, 4 years, I did extensive short season trials. I tested, I think it was 28 corn varieties, less than 100 days. I'm in southern Lancaster County, just to give you an idea. 112 to 116 day is the what's considered full season in my area. I'm winter hardiness zone 6B. If that helps you, if you understand those winter hardiness zones. So I went less than 100 days. I had some at 105, 107 just for comparison, but I wanted to find some genetics that did really well. Short season, plant them first. Actually take them off in the middle of September, almost now. and then be able to plant your cover crop right away. The idea is to get a better cover crop growth, because that's one of the barriers of cover cropping. And there's not much growth time in the fall when you take corn off in November. So one of the things that I learned in testing that many varieties, and by the way, I came out of those 28 varieties of corn, 3 varieties were really good, amazing. An 89 day, a 93 day. What was that other? And I don't know, it was in that range, which is very short. That's very short season. The other thing too that I found out, and I did not catch it until later on, when other people started seeing my research and started duplicating it. Had a guy in Iowa that did it, short season genetics. Had a guy in further north Lancaster County, better soil than mine, on good, fairly flat soil, and did not find any varieties that yielded enough to be of interest, below 100 days. So since my farm, if you've been to my farm, and I'm in what we call the River Hills. I'm 2 miles from the Susquehanna River. I have some 17% slopes. It's well drained. I'm in Lancaster County, but I'm not in the Lancaster County part that you hear about. So my average yields is about 180 bushel. That's field, that's wall to wall. That's the average yield. That's not the section out of the best. I'm just saying my average yield is about 180 on the farm. So I'm not in the 250 bushel range like some parts of Lancaster County are. Okay, so let's just establish that. So my soil tends to dry out because I'm well drained in August, tends to. So I don't have the advantage of full season genetics. That's where full season genetics really kick butt, when you get good moisture in August, that they have much more horsepower, we say there, to give your yield potential. So I think that's why my results looked pretty good. Well, what can we learn from that? Well, what we learn from it, what I'm telling people now, is use short season genetics on your poorest fields. And if it's usually, in this case, would be your well-drained fields. We'll just say that the fields that tend to dry out. It's just a tactic that you can use to get cover crops planted early. Those fields need the soil health improvements better anyway. So that was that's my take on it. If you're 250 bushel corn and you think you're going to yield 250 bushel with an 89 day corn, I'm not promising that. If that's your average, I'm saying, okay, just so we're just talking averages here. So the other thing too, I did test the biomass production of cover crop planted basically the middle of September versus the end of September, like planted now versus planted in 2 to 3 weeks from now. And we got double the biomass the following spring, where we planted 2 to 3 weeks sooner in the fall at the planting date that we planted. I forget which date it was. I think the end of April or something like that. But what was more interesting was I took all those plots. This was a very complex thing I did. I feel very good about it, very proud about what I did, because it took a lot of work. It was a 2-year experiment. We did all the plots, replicated 3 times. Most of the fields were 1,000 feet long. Very good data, by the way. And we harvested that corn the day it was at 20%, more or less. That was our target moisture, to be fair to the concept. We harvested, so when it was 20%, we harvested that variety, whenever that was. And some years, several of the genetics were harvested almost the same time, just the way things work. Other years were spread out over 6 weeks, because I had some 116-day corn. So what was interesting is that we took the following year in those fields, we planted 1 hybrid of corn and kept the yield, or the original shorter season varieties had cover crops planted immediately. So if you looked at these fields in the end of November, you would see some cover crops 12 inches tall and some cover crops 2 inches tall because they were planted 4 weeks sooner. So just picture all these stripes, all these replications out there. Now it's our cover crop trial. It's morphed from short season to cover crop. Then we planted one hybrid, but I kept everything organized, and then I would take off all the rows and weigh all the replications of the yield of that one hybrid to see what was the advantage by planting cover crops 2 to 3 or 4, even 6 weeks earlier. And we consistently got 7 to 10 to 12 bushels more when we planted into cover crops that were seeded earlier in the fall. So you could say we could almost afford to lose, I'm just going to say 8 to 10 bushel on a short season corn and make it up the next year. But there's other factors here in short season genetics. Number one is it does spread out harvest window, which is good. You can start, we're not suggesting you plant your whole farm in a 89-day variety. Let's say 10% at the most, or a field or two. Who doesn't like to get the first field, get the combine dialed in and get ready to go? Everything's ready to go. There's a value to that. There's weather sometimes, not a lot in the mid-Atlantic here, but sometimes weather can come in. It's nice to have that field off. Sometimes you can catch an early price premium in your area. Like my area is an importing county for feed. So we'll be sometimes 50, 60, 70 cents over Chicago for a week or two there. And who doesn't want to be the first farmer in the neighborhood harvesting corn or beans? I remember one day we were selling corn all day, taking it to the local grain elevator, and no one else was there. I mean, later on in the season, you might wait an hour or two in line just to go unload it. What's the value of that? There's a lot of little things add up to shorter season genetics. I'll say this, in Pennsylvania, it has dramatically influenced the soybeans. I'll back up one step here. Let's go back to corn. I talked to the one Pioneer salesman from Lancaster County. He said he is now selling 20% of his genetics less than 100 days. I was surprised to hear that number. That was last year I heard this. The other thing I'll tell you is soybeans in Pennsylvania. I know these figures because I'm up to date with what they do. It's dramatically shortened up their group. A lot of the guys are growing 2.7, 2.6, 2.5, 2.8 beans, and they're about ready to harvest now. And again, Pennsylvania has a lot of rolling hills, well drained. So, they may not take advantage of long season genetics. So another long-winded answer, I guess, Eric, but do you have any follow-up questions on that, or?
Of course I got follow-up questions. So we talked about short season genetics, and I'm sure you've been reading the same articles that I have in a lot of the No-Till magazines over the past couple of months about longer maturity soybeans planted very early, where you take like a late group 4, mid group 4, and you plant it April 1st.
Yep.
And have you experimented with doing anything like that into a living cover? And what do you think the results would be?
No, I've not. Partly because I'm not quite classified as a corn soybean farmer with all my vegetables and everything. So it's not like my core business here. So I haven't. And I'll just say, since I'm not in the cover crop seed business anymore, I haven't been doing as much research that's related to cover crops specifically. And so I haven't done it. I've heard some amazing results of super early planted long season beans, tremendous yields. I haven't done it myself. So I'm reading the same things you are, Eric, on that.
We had one customer that I think tried it by accident. It seems like his beans weren't quite pure with the genetics. And he had a mix of beans, and some were a late group 2. And they had about 30 pods per plant. Okay. And there were off types in the field. Maybe 1% of the plants were an off type, and you could clearly tell that those off types were like a late group 4. And the difference in pods was an average of 30 to an average of 130. It was crazy. And so it really got my wheels spinning about planting rye, planting triticale. Yep. Going in April, hitting that triticale with 2,4-D and metribuzin, things that are not going to kill the triticale, yet will give us mare's tail suppression.
Right.
Then planting those beans April 1st, and then just killing the triticale whenever we please.
Yeah. No, and here's the thing, Eric, is we all well know here, cover cropping is never a one size fits all. And even that has to do with farming and the whole thing with soybeans. It sounds like we just talked about completely opposite scenarios. And I would say the answer is they're both right. And it depends exactly what you're trying to do. I mean, if you're a major soybean grower, I'd be trying that. Of course. I wouldn't want all my fields planted in the 1st of April, not in southern Lancaster County. That's a little risky yet, I would say. But that being said, it seems to be, I'm hearing enough evidence that people are doing that it seems to be working. So I'd try it in the field if I was a bigger grower. But honestly, I haven't planted soybeans for 2 years now, so I'm not even planting soybeans. But to answer your question on that, but again, that's a personal thing for me because, and you might ask why. Well, price hasn't been that great, one thing, but the other thing is soybeans are not that great for the soil. They don't build organic matter, that's for sure, and so why grow them? That's my opinion. I'm not saying that's what other people should think, but for my situation, soybeans don't have a fit in my, primarily vegetables. So, and also corn for me is more of a rotational crop. I grow corn for my Amish neighbors. And I kind of had a personal goal not to sell any crop to the local grain elevator, not to sell it as a commodity. Not that I have anything against my local grain elevator, not at all. But for me, it was just a personal goal. It's kind of to help the community, kind of that sort of stuff that, it's just a personal thing. But I got to tell you, I figure I usually get more money from corn silage that I can chop and put right in my neighbor's silo directly. I don't have to store it. And then I can plant my cover crop. Like right now, my son's planting in the field that we just harvested 2 days ago. He would have had it planted all already, but we had some other things that come up. But he's out there planting, it's, what time is it? It's 8:21 here. We're getting it done. It'll be planted here in the next hour. The rest of that field that we just chopped here 2 days ago. So that's what I like about corn silage in that. So I know I strayed from your question, but.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So I would be remiss. We've got 10 minutes left on this call. Be remiss to not ask you about fertility practices. Next week, the group's going to be talking about fertility practices. And I would love it if you could spend a few minutes just sharing with us kind of what you do with basic soil testing and how often you do it, what your target pH is, potassium levels are, and just some of the basic things like that you're looking for.
Yeah. So first of all, I'll give you some concepts and maybe philosophical meanderings here. I believe that cover crops make fertilizer more efficient. And you could say that maybe it's really saying that soil health makes fertilizer more efficient, meaning when you get into the system of the biology beginning to come alive, you don't need as many inputs. That takes time though. And that's the thing that people fail to realize. They read these articles about these farmers that are cutting the fertilizer bills and they think you can do it in 2 years. I'm saying that's pretty rare. I've been at this for many years, decades. And I still use fertilizer. I use less of it. So I like to keep my pH in that 6.7, 6.9. That's kind of a target. I feel that my pH has stabilized somewhat over the years. I've never charted it out to actually run it, the data on it. Just never have time to do that stuff, it seems. But it seems I don't put as much lime on, I can tell you that. And I watch the calcium. Actually, when I get a soil test back, one of the first things I look at is the base saturation. That's what I really look at that. Where am I coming up from fertility? I want to see, I'm going to see my calcium levels above 70%, 70 to 78% range, and potassium up to 5%, 6%, 7% even. I don't cringe at that because I'm growing pumpkins and tomatoes in my high tunnel. They need potassium. And I do occasionally get manure from neighbors, not regularly. It depends when it's available. Some of it's cow manure, some of it's chicken manure. It's sporadic. It's never consistent. And we did get mushroom soil for a while, but COVID pretty much shut down the mushroom industry, so there hasn't been any mushroom soil around the last 9 months. So basically, once you get into this system, and you asked about soil testing, so I try to test my whole farm every 3 years. That's what I stick to, and every decade or so. Last time I did it was 2015. Is I'll do 0 to 2, 2 to 4, and 4 to 8, just to see where my profile is, what it's looking like. And of course, I'm always paying attention to organic matter, and that's a good indicator of, you know, how well I'm doing and trying to build that up. And so I feel that the longer you get into a soil health system, a very intentional soil health system, the less important a nutrient balance becomes. I used to be a fanatic. It was like all about balance soil. And I would try to, you know, just get everything according to the ideal things. My opinion now is the longer you go into soil health, the less important that is. Not that's not important, less important. Do you ever take a soil sample in the woods? It's probably like 29% calcium base saturation, very low everything. And it's like, you look at that woods and say, how can anything even grow there?
I do that down at our farm where we have our cornfields right next to woodland, and I'll take a soil test in the woodland, and the organic matter is off the chart, and the pH is rock bottom.
Yep. And no calcium, no phosphorus.
Nothing. It has nothing.
How does it grow? And so that, honestly, that is a legitimate question. And that behooves us to consider how we farm. And this is why I'm getting to this point. I'm not as concerned as I used to be. I don't know where I'm going to end up. I'm on a journey like we all are. Some of you are just starting, but this is what I love about this, because none of us, it's not going to be figured out in my lifetime. That's for sure. But we have not done much in the soil biology realm of soil. And, you know, I wonder sometimes if you could just somehow just take a woods and cut it off without any damage and plant corn in there without any shade from the trees, how that corn would grow with no fertility. I wish I could do that. I've thought already of trying to collect undisturbed section of soil and just bring it out and put it in a bucket and see if a corn plant will grow in it. But there's something about that theory that there's something, I mean, I keep saying that mimic nature and all that stuff. That's all great in theory. It sounds good. Everyone's, yeah, that's true, right? But how can we mimic some of this stuff out in our fields? And I really think, and this is going to get into I don't want to be controversial here, but I think some of our fertility is actually hurting our biology, and we're addicted to it too much. It's like sugar. You know, of course, we all would love to have lots of sugar because it's good. It makes us feel good. But too much sugar is very detrimental to our health. I think nitrogen is like sugar. Nitrogen is killing some of the good things out there. We don't fully understand it. Maybe there's other things too. And again, I don't want to get into controversy here, but I think there's something that we have been too addicted to some of these amendments, I'll say, that they, you know, you always need more to make the same yield. And you can prove that with research, but does that mean it's right? I don't know. I'm asking these questions myself, Eric. I mean, I'm using, I mean, for instance, for the first time ever this year, I have 4 acres that I didn't plant a cash crop in because it was going to go to hemp. And then where it ended up, I decided not to plant the hemp. So at the end of June, it was a nice cover crop of triticale, vetch, and a couple other things. We rolled it down and we planted in there buckwheat and sunflowers. and a pretty thick rate. Now the sunflowers are brilliantly blooming and they are just awesome. There is no fertility applied to that field at all. And you would think when you look at that field, it's just humming with insects. And I'm just when I look at that, I thought, wow, nothing applied. Now I am gonna, hopefully, if the sunflower seeds mature, I'm gonna try to harvest them. And then I'm gonna come back again and harvest the buckwheat that's in the lower story, that's underneath there. I don't know, we'll see. But I just use that as an example. There's something there that we don't know yet. We don't fully understand. There's some people I think are starting to tap into this. Of course, the chemical companies, the fertilizer companies don't like to hear that. And I'm not out to put anybody out of business, but the reality of it is if I can get off some of that, it's going to save me some money. And if I can grow a healthier, more nutritious food product, I need to figure this out. So that's a little bit where I'm at. So I used up like our last minutes on that answer, but.
Well, I see John unmuted himself, which maybe he has a question. If he doesn't have a question, I've got one more, but John, I'll let you
I
go
have a
first.
question. Steve?
Yes, go ahead, John.
Steve, the question I have is in grazing the animals. So I planted my cover crop between about the third week of August and the first week of September. I got about 70 acres.
Okay.
When my plan was to put them out there starting like maybe end of October, beginning of November.
Yeah.
And then graze them through till December, maybe until they're finished. The question is, I rotationally graze. So when I rotationally graze, like they move every day, sometimes twice a day, and I'm leaving, taking maybe half off, leaving the other half. How do I graze this cover crop? I never grazed this cocktail. I've always grazed like triticale, rye, and oats. I've never grazed a cocktail like this.
Yep.
So when will the brassicas and the turnips be ready for me to do this? And how aggressively do you graze this crop so that you don't overgraze it, so that you don't have much coming up in the spring to graze again?
Well, first of all, John, I'm going to tell you, I'm not a grazer. So just putting that out there, I'll just tell you the little I might know. And I think, you just got to approach this like you do with your other things. Everything you said from a grazing standpoint, I agree with what your management tactics are there. The brassicas really come on strong. They like cooler weather. We're supposed to start cooling down this weekend. That's when the brassicas really come on strong. October is the month for brassicas. But it's like everything else. Don't graze it if you want it. Some of your brassicas, depending which ones they are, may survive the winter. Some won't. Depends. If you have rape in there, that's going to survive. Turnips, maybe not. Radishes, they'll probably die. But just treat it like your other grazing situation. If you want there's something to be there in the spring, you can't hit it too hard. But since you planted it relatively early, you want to take some of it off, because when you plant some of these cover crops in August, they may not survive because they grow too much and they're almost too rank and they smother themselves. So a nice grazing, and it sounds like you're on top of it. You should be fine. Just use everything and just apply it to this situation.
Okay, I didn't know if you had to leave a lot more or a lot less on the radishes, because I never used them before. I wasn't sure.
Radishes can take. I'll put it this way: if you would take the radishes, if there's a tuber, sometimes they'll start coming up out of the ground. By the way, it doesn't necessarily mean compaction, but that's just the way they are. If that tuber is broken off by a hoof, it's dead, done. If they bite it off and there's still I'm going to say just an inch of green layer left, that'll grow out, because that tuber is really strong.
I got you.
So you're going to break a few off. That's just part of it, because it's not like, I know you said you hated annual ryegrass, and that's fine, but annual ryegrass would survive, no problem.
No, you misunderstood me. I have annual ryegrass. I grow it all the time.
Okay.
The concern here is where I'm going to get ready to plant my
Mhm.
my Sudan grass in the end of May, early June.
Mhm.
Because I don't use chemicals to kill it,
Wow.
the annual rye is the hardest of that group to get rid of.
It's hard enough with chemicals, John. So
I know.
you're right.
So that's the only reason. I have other crops where I use like double play or Triticale Plus.
Yes.
I do it all the time. It's just that in this field, I'm experimenting for the first time without annual rye because it's just an awful, what do I do if it's really aggressive and it's like a carpet out there?
Mhm.
It's going to be a lot of work. And then I got to use major tillage to kill it in order to get my cash crop in.
Yeah.
That was the concern I have in
Well,
experimenting with it.
you know, your cereal rye and triticale can withstand hoof traffic pretty well. So that's the beauty of mixes. You know, you kind of have, like, if you'd have a straight radish, which would be really too succulent for animals, it'd be too hot. That wouldn't be good. Radishes are the salt and pepper, or brassicas are the salt and pepper of the mix. That's how I describe them. And it's just, I think, an accurate way to describe them.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
We had one quick question for you in the comments. You just mentioned planting buckwheat and sunflowers. Did you do that with a 7 or 12-inch drill, or did you do it with a planter?
It was a 7.5-inch drill. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard of someone doing that before, planting buckwheat and sunflowers. See, the buckwheat would almost be ready to harvest now because it bloomed early. It was really interesting. I'm not sure if I took enough pictures of this field, but at first the buckwheat outgrew the sunflowers. Totally white field, blooming buckwheat. Now the sunflowers stretched above the buckwheat and it's totally yellow with sunflowers now. Pretty cool. So the sunflowers are 5-6 feet tall at least. My idea is to go and just snap all that. I don't have to get every head. I just want to collect some seeds to use them for cover crop next year again. And then I'll come in and cut lower and catch the buckwheat. And I don't care if there's some sunflower seeds in the buckwheat because I'm going to plant it next year myself. And I'm trying to grow most of my own cover crop seeds, by the way, that I can here. Triticale, hairy vetch. I can't grow them all. But I have my own combine. We got our own seed cleaner now, which was a kind of a big deal for us because now we can kind of do what I want to do. I want to try to be as self-contained as I possibly can be.
Thanks. Anyone have any quick last minute questions? Cool. Thanks everyone so much for logging in, and Steve, thanks so much for your time and sharing your expertise. It was great. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, and I hope you guys can all join us next week
Thank
to
you.
hear from Eric.
All right.
Thank you.